So welcome everybody to the latest Jodel webinar. This evening it's my absolute pleasure to be working with Alison Woodrow from Texthelp. Alison is going to be showing us some different tools from Texthelp which help with inclusive language education. Alison's a former languages teacher, so she's perfectly suited to tell us all about how the Texthelp tools can help language lessons, either at primary, secondary, and I'm sure beyond as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I will be collecting the questions throughout as per normal and putting those questions to Alison. So do keep your questions coming. And huge thank you to Alison for doing this. And over to you, Alison. Thank you ever so much.
No problem at all. And thank you so much, Joe, for having me along tonight. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate all of you who have given up your Monday evening to spend with me to talk about foreign languages. I'm going to slightly correct Joe. I'm not a former languages teacher, although I did teach English as a foreign language for a little while. But I haven't actually been a languages teacher in the UK. But MFL is absolutely my background. That's what I studied. I studied to degree level, and then I've always worked in international business, and that's actually how I ended up working for Texthelp. I joined the international team there. But at the moment, my job title is Group School Specialist, so that is predominantly UK, England and Wales. So I'm going to try my language skills and learning a little bit of Welsh. That's what I'm up for next. But I primarily at the moment work with LEAs and multi-academy trusts on their inclusion, accessibility, EdTech strategies. That's predominantly what I'm working on at the moment. I'm coming at you tonight from County Antrim. It's kind of windy and cold, to be honest. I did see a few people popping up in the chat there from Northern Ireland, so that's great. But I know obviously there are people from all over. So if I'm talking too fast or anything like that, please just let me know. So I'm based about 40 miles from Belfast, and Texthelp's offices are about 20 miles from Belfast in Antrim town. Help if it's new to any of you, which I'm sure it may well be. Our purpose is to help everyone understand and be understood. So that's quite clear. It's all about making sure that if there are barriers for any of your students in terms of how they access text and how they produce work, that we can help them to supersede those barriers, that we can work with them in the way that suits them best, to help them reach their full potential, really. That's what we do with our technologies. Background, we've been around now for over 20 years, helping people to read, write, communicate with accuracy and with fluency. And we've currently got in and around 40 million users of our tools worldwide. The tools that I'm going to show you tonight, I'm going to work predominantly in Google tonight, but we do have tools available in across platforms. So if you're using Windows, if you're using iPads in your schools, please just stay tuned, stay with me, because we absolutely have things for you as well. The read and write, the main tool that I'm going to show you, works across all of the platforms. So please be encouraged to stay, even if you're not using Google predominantly. We talk a lot about supporting students, but we also talk about supporting teachers as you support your students in terms of SEN, EAL, inclusion, accessibility, all those kind of words that I've already mentioned, but also in specific subject areas. So literacy, numeracy, English, STEM subjects, and of course MFL, which we're going to look at tonight. So before we start, I know that sometimes when someone says icebreaker, it strikes fear into your hearts, but you're all at home, you're all safe, and you're anonymous. So I'm going to just ask you, just introduce yourself a little bit to me, to find out a little bit more about you, and to find out a little bit more about where you're coming from in terms of your languages. I would love you to go on your browser or on your phone, just go to Slido, and it will bring up a little box that says enter code here. So enter the code that you'll see there on the screen, 479890, and we'll just have a little bit of fun and get to know each other a little bit before I dive into the meaty part of tonight. So I'll just give you a moment to do that, and hopefully very shortly the first question should appear. In one word, how are you feeling this evening? So I have started by saying I'm cold. Autumn has definitely hit County Antrim. Okay, a bit tired, I understand that on a Monday night. Busy, great, tired. I'm usually in my pajamas. Full disclosure, by this time of night, I am usually in my pajamas. So I totally am with you on that. A little Spanish bit there. Fabulous. Happy, tired, cold, and hungry. Where is the chocolate? I don't know. I have none either. Excited. Great. Okay, so on the whole, people seem to be pretty happy, pretty excited, maybe a little bit tired, but hopefully I will be able to keep your interest as we go through the evening. Relaxed. Oh, great. That's what we aim for. Fab. Okay, great. Here we go. Next question. Are you wearing your pajamas right now? So just have a little click on the poll and let me know. No judgment from me. The first thing. It'll be the first thing I do afterwards, so that's me too. Absolutely. Business on the top, PJs on the bottom. I'm so glad somebody went for that. Great. Okay, brilliant. Next question. So we're moving into actually doing, and just to give me an idea of who is here tonight and who I'm addressing, let me know if you're an MFL teacher, if you're a STEM professional, if you're senior leadership or something else. The vast majority MFL teachers. Is that everyone in? A couple of others. Okay. If you want to pop in the chat, the ones maybe, if you don't mind, the ones who are other, just let me know what brought you here tonight. Great. Okay. Vast majority MFL teachers. Perfect. So for those of you who are MFL teachers, what do you love about it? Now, this is one that can be as long or as short an answer as you want. Just let me know what you love about it, because I love languages, and I am sure if you're teachers, you love languages as well, and that doesn't mean it's without its challenges. And we'll talk a little bit about some of those in a moment. But just tell me what you love about it. Let's start at the positive and being really excited about it. Being able to communicate with others, sharing your love for Irish. I'd love to learn about Irish. Open-mindedness, that's a great one. The students, communication, the beautiful light bulb moments. I love that. I remember when I finally understood the subjunctive in Spanish, that was a definite light bulb moment. Being able to communicate with people from other countries, all about communication, promoting the love for languages, opening up the world to young people. Cultural aspect. The look on a student's face when they realize they know more than what they thought. Fabulous. Discovering the world together with the students. These are all so lovely. Brilliant. Hearing the pupils speak my language. That's, yes, very interesting. Fab. Students get it. Seeing the fun, pride, and confidence students gain. That's a really lovely one, and we'll definitely be touching on that and some of these others tonight. Brilliant. Okay, fab. So that's what we love about it. What are the biggest challenges that you face? And again, be honest here. I can't see who's answering behavior. So let's just get a feel for what your challenges are. And again, hopefully I'll be able to try and address some of those this evening. Disengagement, massive one, yeah. You see, yeah, okay, Google Translate, that's interesting, yeah. Brexit, motivation, no budget and no time for fun. Parents viewing the subject, that's a really important one. Getting students motivated, engaging lower ability students, we'll definitely touch a little bit on that. Disengagement, if I missed any time. Views of the subject. Views on the subject, that's come up a few times now. That is a biggie. Students being committed. Lack of classes, the negative attitude again. Long hours. Okay. This is great. Thanks so much, everybody. That's all really helpful, and I'll definitely be able to touch on some of those. Stage 3 students, okay. Just give another moment in case there are any more coming through. Support from senior management, okay. Workload. Okay. Okay, we'll definitely be able to look at some of that tonight and see if some of our EdTech solutions can help in some of those areas. That's really fantastic. Thanks so much for your honesty on that. Last one's a really quick one, and I think I know what the answer will be, but you might surprise me. Which element of language learning is the trickiest for your students? Oh. Okay. Still going? This is really interesting because it's much closer than I thought it would be. I thought there were probably 2 would stand out. Amazing. And you can okay, that's really interesting. It's much closer. I, generally speaking, find that speaking is the one that most people will talk about, but actually the verbal side of it, the oral side of it, the oral exams can be the most challenging for students. So that's really interesting that tonight it's a little bit closer, but we can absolutely help with all of those. Brilliant. Thank you so much. That was really, really interesting, even just for me. So yes, tonight we're going to look at how EdTech can support all of your students. So we're looking at those 4 areas that I've just asked you about: the listening and speaking, the reading and the writing, the input, listening and reading, and the output, speaking and writing, and what tools are available there to help all of your students with any of those, in any of those ways. But what we're also going to look at are, in a less general sense, some of the students who might need that little bit of extra help. Okay, so we could be talking about students, perhaps SEN students who are in your MFL classroom, EAL students, so someone who is already working in their 2nd or 3rd language and now they're having to learn another language over and above that, in an environment, in a language that isn't familiar to them. So we've got those students basically with any kind of challenge, anything that is facing them that makes language learning just that little bit trickier. And a lot of you mentioned engagement and interesting and keeping students motivated and keeping them interested in languages. A lot of you mentioned that as a challenge. And so I'm hoping tonight that I can show you some tools that can really help in that area, that can really give students different ways of working. We talk a lot about differentiation, and I know some teachers don't love the word differentiation because it has often in the past meant a lot more work for you. But how can we actually provide different means for your students of learning by using EdTech tools? And how do we make your MFL classroom that little bit more inclusive? And then hopefully by doing that, you will retain those students. And I know another one that you mentioned, a lot of you mentioned, was the sort of the view of language learning and how parents maybe think it's not as important a subject and so on. And that's something that I have been quite involved with locally in the past. I've worked with a couple of local schools and universities in trying to sort of enthuse people that languages can be really useful and can be a really useful extra, even if it's not your primary route. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, even if it's not your primary route of further or higher education, that it can be a really nice extra string to your bow. And actually just last week, I saw an ad for a pharmacist who could speak fluent Spanish. And I just thought, I don't know why, somewhere in England, someone needed a pharmacist who spoke fluent Spanish. And most pharmacy students don't think of doing a language as well. So how do we engage with those sort of students who are definitely heading down a different path, but to encourage them that a language is something that they can do alongside those other things. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at tonight, some of these tools that can hopefully engage and hold on to some of those students who otherwise opt out a little bit earlier than we would like. These are just a couple of stats, just by sort of way of sort of easing into to the demo, and almost 22% of students in UK school sectors receive SEND support identified with speech, language and communication. Well, speech, language and communication are fairly key elements of MFL teaching. So this is an important stat. 17% is the estimated percentage of pupils in all UK schools who have identified dyslexia, or unidentified dyslexia. And this one kind of blows my mind a little bit, but also doesn't, because this was my best friend. My best friend, who I proofread for years, and was diagnosed with dyslexia when she was doing her master's. So it didn't hold her back. She did her A-levels, she did her degree, she went on to study a master's, but it definitely was more of a struggle, and it definitely kept her from reaching her full potential. And so we're not just looking at those students who have something that's really recognizable, you know, the EAL students or the students who have a diagnosed learning challenge. We're also thinking about the others who might just struggle with something that's language-based for whatever reason, and it might be something unidentified and something that they're unaware of and that you're unaware of. So how do we engage with all of these different challenges within our classroom? We think EdTech is a massive part of the answer, and I hope that after the end of tonight, you will think so too. Now, I wonder, Joe, should I take a bit of a break there? Are there any questions so far, or should I keep going?
We've got one question from Melody, which is she was wondering whether you'd be happy to share your slides at the end of the presentation, or we can send it out to people if you're happy to share them via the Eventbrite email, as it were.
Yeah, that's no problem at all. More than happy to do that.
Fantastic. I just think it's been really interesting so far. Those percentages are really fascinating, aren't they, on the screen there? It's such an eye opener, because obviously everybody will be working with SEN students, and it's staggering, really, isn't it, that what those percentages are? But I can't wait to see how Texthelp can help with this issue that everybody has.
I know. I think we've often in the past, and I mean, I remember this myself, we've often in the past thought you're either a language person or you're not. And I actually think that's a huge part of what has fed in to some of those challenges that you're now facing around the views around languages and so on. You know, we have this thing, I think, especially in the UK, you're either a language person or you're not. And I think what we would all as language teachers love to encourage our students with is that, you know, we can all do this. And if you had to, you would be able to do it. If you were thrown into a situation where you had to move to a different country, you would learn the language. So how do we ease that, sort of smooth that big divide that there is between non-language people and language people? And that can be, you know, it can be for any number of reasons, as we've just outlined. But I just think there's always been that sort of thing in the UK and Ireland where there's kind of, people feel that I'm just not into languages, so I'll drop it as soon as I can. So let's see how we can try and encourage people and help people and provide them with the supports to keep them in it for a little bit longer. Okay, so absolutely no problem. I'll share my slides. My email address was on the first slide. If you didn't get a chance to write it down, I'll give you another email address at the end, so you can get in touch afterwards. I'm going to walk you through 3 products that we can offer from Texthelp, 3 solutions. I know Joe and I had a chat, and he had said that you would be able to know what's available to you and around pricing and so on. Just before we start, there are loads of variables to all of these things, loads of variables that will affect your pricing and will affect sort of any premium versions. So again, if you get in touch with me at the end, or you know, if you do time down the line, get in touch with me using the email address, and I will walk you through what it would look like for your particular situation, because I don't want to mislead anyone or say anything that anyone might misunderstand tonight. So we would do that on a case-by-case basis very much. So as I'm working through these, just bear that in mind and absolutely come back to me, and I will sort you out at a later stage. So we're going to look at 3 solutions tonight. Read and Write, some of you may be familiar with. It's very much Texthelp's flagship product. It's been around for a long time. Obviously, it's constantly evolving, constantly growing. And it is pretty much exactly what it sounds like, Read and Write. It's a literacy support tool. So it's helping students with their understanding, their comprehension, that intake of information, and also helping them as they express themselves. And Read and Write has various tools, which we'll go through in a little moment, and they work in various languages in different ways. And it's basically just a scaffold for your students, that there are elements of read and write that will be really useful to one student, and then there will be different elements that will be useful to another student, and there are elements that will be useful to you as staff as you work with those students, okay? But it's all around reading and writing. Very self-explanatory. Fluency Tutor is the next one I'm going to talk about. Fluency Tutor is one that I get really excited about as a linguist, because I think it's something that is a little bit of a game changer. The spoken element of a language, which we all know as linguists, is what comes whenever you actually are immersed in that country, and you're surrounded by the language, and it's very, very hard to replicate that in a classroom, and it's very hard to get enough spoken practice. So this is just a really simple little tool that helps with that, and I'm really excited about showing that to you tonight. I was thinking today that I remember when I was doing A-levels, I would sit and watch like Spanish movies, and my family would roll their eyes and say, "You're not revising." And I was going, "Well, I know, but I'm just trying to get in the Spanish frame of mind, or the French, whatever it was." And they sort of laughed at me. But I think there's so much more available now for students, and Fluency Tutor is one way in which you can really practice your spoken language. I'm going to show you lastly a lovely little tool called Orbit, and Orbit is for working in PDFs. So for any of your resources that you already have in PDF format, for anything that you might be taking off the web and wanting to use with your students, it's just a brilliant way of allowing you to work completely in that PDF without having to copy and paste into other documents, without your students having to reply to the assignments in another document. Everything can be done within the PDF, and it's the total loop from assignment to completion and back through to your feedback. And that all works through Google Classroom. Okay, so those are the three we're going to look at predominantly tonight. We're going to just look at this sort of idea of a personalized learning experience, of inclusion, accessibility, as I've already said, practical strategies for improving fluency, and for writing and reading and all of those things that are so very important for you as language teachers. Okay, so I'm just going to pop straight into a demo again, unless there are any questions at this point. I'll hop straight into a demo. Joe, are you happy?
Yeah, lovely. That? No questions so far, but I'm sure we're all dying to see the demonstration of the different tools. I'm a big fan of Read and Write, for example, and can't wait to see the new tools that you've just mentioned there as well. It's fantastic.
Well, this is where the questions will probably start, isn't it? When I get into
absolutely, this. Yeah. So keep your questions coming, everyone. This is the time for your questions. That'd be great.
Brilliant. So I'm going to start with Read and Write. And what I'm going to do is a bit of an overview, because obviously we don't have lots and lots of time tonight. I can't keep you here for 3 hours. So I'm just going to do a bit of an overview. But again, if you want a more full in-depth demo, I would love nothing more than to have 40, 50 emails in my inbox tomorrow morning saying that they want a demo. So please don't be afraid to ask, and I'm happy to do something a little bit more in depth. But for tonight, I'm going to give you a bit of an overview, show you some of the tools and how they might be used in MFL, and we'll take it from there. So I'm in a Google Doc, but as I said at the start, Read and Write also works on iPads, on Windows, on Macs. So if you don't use Google Docs normally, don't be put off by this. Again, that's something I can walk you through at a later stage, but I'll use Google Docs for the purposes of tonight. And Read and Write sits up at the top right-hand corner. It's just this little jigsaw puzzle piece that I hope you can see on my screen. And if I click on that now, you're going to see a toolbar drop down. This toolbar has a number of features. I'm going to show you as many as I can tonight. But it has loads of features in there, lots to play around with, lots that you will figure out how to use in your own unique way. I will just be giving you a bit of a jumping off point tonight. But the idea behind Read and Write is that it pulls a lot of tools that should hopefully pull everything that you need together into one toolbar, and anything that your students will need together into one toolbar, so that you don't need a separate piece of software or a separate device or a separate tool for all of these individual students, that everything that you might possibly need is in this one toolbar. Okay, and I'm hopefully going to be able to show you a little bit of that now. So Read and Write, the basis, the sort of the what it's built around is trying to make text accessible, and the first way that we do that is by having it read aloud. Okay, Now, this works in umpteen languages. I'll press play now, I'll show you what it looks like and hopefully you'll be able to hear it. Sometimes in demos it's not always so clear to hear, but hopefully you will tonight.
Hola Jennifer, gracias por hacerla. ¿Cómo estás?
Okay. Apologies for anyone who doesn't speak Spanish, by the way. I'm just using a Spanish article for these purposes, but this is obviously an interview with Jennifer Lopez. And if you could hear that voice, which I hope you could, you'll have heard that it's in a perfect, beautiful Spanish voice. If I go to the top right-hand corner here, these three little dots, I'm just going to give you an idea for some of the options that we have available. There we go. Some of the options that we have available here for that speech. So if you see we're in a menu now, a speech menu, and if I drop down here, you're going to see how many languages and how many voices we have built in here, okay? So for any of your language classes that you might be doing, should it be German? Should it be French? Should it be Irish? I know we had at least one Irish teacher on there. Should it be Welsh? If there are any Welsh speakers here, any Welsh teachers, we've got all of the voices, Italian, all of the voices that you might possibly need. So you would pick the one, or your student would pick the one that is most suitable for them. In this case, it's going to be Spanish Monica. And just to let you know as well, you can slow that down. So again, for the purposes of language learning, sometimes speaking at a normal speed is too much. So that voice can be slowed right down to a voice that suits the student or suits the class that you're teaching, okay? And it can simply be read aloud in a perfect voice. So that's sort of the bread and butter, isn't it? That making that text accessible by having it read aloud. In language learning, it takes on a whole new meaning because it also helps them with pronunciation and it helps with listening and all of those things that are tied into language learning. So it's not just about accessibility. And in your case, it's also about those listening and comprehension skills as well. Thinking about comprehension, we've also got some dictionaries built in. Now, these dictionaries are available in French, Spanish, let's see if I can remember off the top of my head, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Dutch. I think that's it. Let me just double check. So it's available in, let's see, French, Spanish, Dutch, Portuguese, yes, and this Indonesian language as well at the bottom of the Bahasa, okay? So that's not to mean that you cannot use read and write in your German class or in your Italian class or whatever it might be, but that's what the dictionaries are available in, are those languages. And we've got a normal text dictionary. So let me see, I'm just going to pick a word. We'll pick the word for cinema. We've got the text dictionary. Again, this can all be read aloud beautifully. And we've also got a really lovely little tool for language learning, which is a picture dictionary. So your students can use this, but you can also use this for creating your resources, for creating vocab lists, whatever it might be. We've got all of these lovely little pictures and these can be manipulated, dragged and dropped, made bigger, whatever it might be. Okay. So the picture dictionary is there for you as well. And this is all around understanding, helping your students with their understanding. Someone put on the challenges Google Translate, and I thought that was really interesting and I completely understand why you put that on there. Google Translate is a challenge. You probably have students who are just taking chunks of text and translating it and then submitting it to you as a good piece of work. So I understand the challenge there. I am going to let you know that there is a translate tool within Read and Write. It's a single word translator, so they can't do that chunk. They don't need to anyway, because as you said, they have Google. It's a single word translator. It's meant to enhance their learning. It's meant to help them out. And again, if we go back to some of those students who maybe have the extra challenges, so whether that's SEN, whether that's EAL, you know, you have a Portuguese student who's learning French in your classroom, that they can even translate it from French to Portuguese, just to give them a help. It's a single word translator. I would just highlight the word, click on it, and it's going to bring up the translation for me, just like that. Okay, so it's just a little extra to let you know that it's there. You may or may not find that to be useful with your students, but it is there. It is built in. Okay. One of probably my favorite tools in Read and Write. Again, we're still in the intake. We're still on the sort of understanding, comprehension, taking in language. One of my favorite tools is this little one here with the headset. It's called Audio Maker. Audio Maker takes a big chunk of text and puts it into an MP3 file. Okay. So in terms of you as teachers, you could use that really quickly to create a listening exercise. In terms of your students, they can use it to help them with their revision, to help them with their pronunciation, perhaps, to help them if they just have a huge chunk of text and they are struggling to read anymore. Maybe they're tired at the end of the day, whatever it might be. I always thought I would use it for revision notes, listen to them on the bus. And it's so quick and easy. I'll just show you, I'll just highlight a chunk of text, a small chunk, but it'll give you an idea. Click on Audio Maker, and it's just going to drop a little MP3 file as quick as that down at the bottom of the screen there. And that then can be put onto their phone or their other devices, whatever it might be, to help them with the revision. And again, if you're thinking about students who have some of those additional challenges, that can be absolutely vital. That can be a real confidence boost. That can just allow them to achieve things that they didn't think they could achieve otherwise. I've told this story before, so if you've been on a webinar with me before, I apologize. I've told the story about, it was a girl last year in Scotland. We found out about it through one of our contacts, and she had dyslexia and she wanted to be in the school play. And this was how they did it. They took the script of the school play, they ran it through Audio Maker, and that's how she learned it. And she had the lead role and by all accounts, absolutely aced it. So that for that pupil was such a confidence boost. Bring that into language learning. Again, we're thinking about some of those students who maybe will disengage quite easily, who maybe struggle because it is a text-heavy subject, whether we like it or not, it is that by the nature of it. So this is a way that they can perhaps engage with text that they haven't been able to in the past. Okay. So that's sort of reading comprehension, taking in text. I'm going to think a little bit just very quickly now of some ways that you can help students as they express themselves. So there are two main tools I'm probably going to look at here today. One is predictive text. Predictive text will work in, again, those languages that I mentioned earlier. You simply click on it, and if I just click somewhere on the page, you can see that a box has appeared. And in theory, I could write a whole sentence without actually needing to type anything by just clicking.
De acuerdo con Frank.
Well, I would have to be careful for what I'm writing. But anyway, you could in theory write a whole sentence without having to actually type. And this is proven to help really with spelling, with sentence maturity, and again, engaging some of those students who maybe aren't great at writing, but are used to predictive text, perhaps on a phone or something like that, and might actually be quite excited to see it in a different language. So that's one way for them to express and create text. Another way is speech to text. If I click on that, it's called Talk and Type. I click on that, and if I just show you, again, this is available in so many languages. It doesn't require training. You might find it really useful in terms of creating resources quickly or adding comments to things quickly, that you can actually do it through by speaking rather than having to type. So just to give you an idea of how that works. Okay, I'll show you it here. Hopefully it will work for me. Again, sometimes just when you're also using microphones for webinars and so on, it doesn't always work just as perfectly as it does otherwise, but I will give it a shot. We'll see how it goes. So I'll click on the microphone. He visto la película tal y cual. Punto. Me gustó porque me gusta el actor. Okay. So that is how Talk and Type works in another language. All right. So again, just a lovely little tool for some of your students who maybe are great at the spoken part of the language, but not so great at the writing, and that they can tap into that. Okay. There are a lot of other tools in here. Probably just one quickly to show you again, if we come back to the accessibility, inclusion, engaging students who maybe struggle with a text-heavy subject, perhaps students with dyslexia, with Mears-Erlens, anything like that, that they struggle with the sort of the amount of text. There's a lovely little tool here called Screen Mask, which works similarly to how a coloured overlay does, a physical coloured overlay that you may have seen for some students. It puts a colour, there are loads of different colours, loads of different options here again, to have a play around within the options menu, but it just allows your student to have that alternative, especially I think at the minute when we're all looking at screens a lot more than we used to, even just in terms of resting your eyes a little bit, this can be really, really helpful. But for some students, it will be an absolute lifeline. in terms of working on a screen. So just to let you know, there are other little tools like that. There's a little voice note option. You may be already using voice notes. So again, it's pulling it all into the same place so that you don't need to go somewhere else to find that. You can just drop a voice note into your student's document, any of those kind of things. Okay. Just one last thing to show you is perhaps this little exercise. And again, these are just little tools that can be fun, that can work well, that can make an activity done on a screen that little bit more interesting. These coloured highlights have several functions, but I'll just show you one. So this question is asking for you to find synonyms in the text. So if I highlight one of these, perhaps in yellow, and then I go and find the answer and highlight it in a different color, let's say pink. And I could do that for the whole list. And then this little feature is called Collect Highlights. So I just click on that and it's going to open up a different document. And it'll have ordered them then. Obviously, I only did it with one of each, but if I'd done it with a number of each, it would have ordered them in the right colors. So it just might be a good way of perhaps answering an activity, completing an activity. There are lots of different things that can be done with those highlights. Actually, while I'm on that, I will show you one more tool. I keep saying it's the last one, but I've just remembered one more that will be really, really useful with languages. And it's called Vocabulary List. So it's baked right in there. Again, I'll use the highlighters. This time it doesn't matter what color. And I'll just pick 2 words to show this, but you'll get the idea of it. You can do it with as many words as you want. Click on Vocabulary List. And again, this is going to create a new document. And it's going to pull in some of those other features. So it's going to pull in the dictionary definition. It's going to pull in the drawing. So again, you imagine if you do that with 10, 12, 20 words, this is a really quick way to produce a resource that you can then edit as much as you want, add as many columns in, make an exercise out of it, whatever you might want to do. That's a really, really lovely one in terms of language learning. Okay. So just before I leave Read and Write, I'm going to quickly pop into a web page, because the web for any of us can be a little overwhelming sometimes. You know, you've got videos popping out at you and starting to play. You didn't ask them to, and you've got pictures and menus and banners and all sorts of things going on. And if you are a student who struggles with focus, struggles with sort of too much visual stimulation, websites can be quite stressful. So we've done something just to sort of help them out with that. I'm just on a news page here. Again, I'll drop down Read and Write, and you'll see it as a toolbar again. This time you can move it around, which is really helpful on a web page. But there's just this little extra tool here at the end, which is called Simplify Page. And again, as staff, you might also use this for creating resources, but it will take the information from this page, open a new tab, and it has taken out all of that noise. It has taken away all of the banners, all of the things that are flashing, and you can actually simplify it down a few times to make it into a much more easily accessible text. And you then, if you're doing this as a member of staff, obviously you can just copy and paste this anywhere else. If the student is using this, they've still got all of the tools of Read and Write there. They can still use their dictionaries, they can still use their screen mask, whatever it is that they want, it's all still there, but it has just cut out a lot of the noise. And I think that's quite important to show in terms of thinking about how we make things like that a little bit easier for students who may struggle. Okay. So that is Read and Write. So it's probably quite a good place to stop again in case there are any questions that relate specifically to Read and Write. Or have I covered it?
So we had the question, as we normally do, about availability in different languages. So Dorothy asked whether there are any plans of adding Polish as one of the languages, presumably because in the UK there are lots of EAL students who are Polish, and that would be really helpful. Any plans to add other languages to Texthelp?
Yeah, it's something that we're always looking at, and we're always looking at what the demand is. But just to remind you, if I go back, just to remind you that many of the tools will work in Polish already. Many of, the voices are still there. All of that is still there. The translator is still there. The speech input, the talk and type will work in Polish. All of those things are still there. The key things that aren't there are the dictionaries. So, but everything else is still there. So it's still really, really useful to your students in that area. In terms of localizing the dictionaries, that's something that we address as the demand comes up, really.
So on that point, Melodies has asked about whether it may be possible to add languages like Russian or Romanian to the dictionaries, or are the dictionaries sort of set in stone, or are there plans to add other languages as well?
As far as I'm aware, we don't have any languages in the backlog at the moment. But I mean, some of the ones that are in there at the minute are relatively recently added. So it's definitely not something that we can rule out. If the demand is there, absolutely, it's something we can look at. At the minute, we've done the one where we've had where we've been asked, or we've had the biggest demand, but that's not to say that it's impossible to add others.
That's lovely. Thank you. I love read write. I think that's brilliant. I love the way that it was so easy to create an MP3 file of the text. That's a question that's been coming up over many, many years in different languages forums. How do you create an MP3 from some text so that my students can learn independently at home to revise? So the story that you told as well about the play was just really heartwarming. That was fantastic.
Yeah, it is a game changer. I mean, for some students, that will make such a massive difference. For others, it'll be a nice to have. Like I genuinely think I would have used it for revision, because I always handwrote. I just handwrote. That was how I revised. Whereas if I could have been listening to it when I was, just in my room or on the bus or whatever, I think I would have really used it for that. And then there are those others, like the story that I told, that are it's a game changer for those pupils. It's a great tool.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's awesome. So that's brilliant. Read and write, awesome. Should we go on to Fluency Tutor now? Is that right?
Let's do it. So
Great.
Let me just see. I will get into Fluency Tutor. Okay, so Fluency Tutor, as I mentioned at the start, is all about the spoken word. And I know that for many people, that can be a real struggle. You can feel quite confident. And again, this was true for me when I was learning languages. You can feel quite confident in writing and in reading and even in understanding. But when it actually comes to having to string a sentence together, it can be a little bit challenging. And this actually happened to me last week. My little daughter has just started preschool, and there's a little girl that she'd gone in with a couple of times, and I wasn't sure. I hadn't spoken to her parents. And then I spoke to her mum, and she's French. Now, I studied French to degree level, and I just haven't had to use it for a few years, and I'm so rusty. And yet, put me in front of a piece of French text and I'll be able to read it. I could probably even manage to write quite fluently still, but I was so rusty. It was just really embarrassing, because I thought I have a degree in this. I should be able to do better than this. But I know it's just practice, and that has always been the case, and we all know that. You all know that as well. It is practice. So that when the best way to learn is to go and live somewhere, isn't it? And to be surrounded by that. Or what I was trying to do, as I was telling you at the start, was listening to, watching movies and trying to sort of absorb it. So Fluency Tutor kind of bridges that gap, I think, and that's why I'm quite excited about it in terms of language learning. I think it bridges that gap really nicely. Just to show sort of more or less what it does, it takes. You can take text from anywhere. So this was a web page. This again was from El Mundo. Okay. And I simply, if I'm in this web page, I'll show you where it is. You see this little green icon up at the top right hand corner? That is Fluency Tutor. And if you click on that, it will pull the article into Fluency Tutor. Okay. And when you're in Fluency Tutor, then what you can do is listen to it read, and listen to it as many times as you want. And then when you feel ready, you can record yourself. So in terms of you setting assignments, this can be used really nicely for that. But even just in terms of a student wanting to practice, perhaps they've got a presentation or their oral exam, they've got their topics, the 5 minute, whatever it is that they have to prepare, they can practice and practice and practice and practice on this. But they're doing it at home in their own room. There's no peer pressure. There's no teacher pressure. So it's just a really lovely way to build confidence. So they can listen to this read again in that accurate voice as many times as they want. They can check the pronunciation of one specific word if that's what they're struggling with, and practice it. And then when they're ready, they can record it. And when they're happy with the recording, if it was an assignment and you want to hear it, they can assign it back to you to listen to. And when it comes to you, let's just give a little example here. When it comes to you, this is going to be an English one, but just to give you an idea of what it looks like, you can then score it. So you listen to it with the play button, you listen to the reading, and you can score the words, mark them where they've maybe hesitated, mark them where they've mispronounced, and then you can go back and help them with those things, or let them know sort of where the issues are. And there are all sorts, again, I'm giving you such a brief overview tonight, but there are all sorts of metrics built in here that will help you to see how your students are doing and to assess how they're doing over time. Okay. So as I say, this can be used in several ways. It can be used by you actually assigning them text to read, or it can be used by them just for practice. Probably a mixture of both is what most people will be using it for. So it's just I just think it's a brilliant little tool and a brilliant way for students to really get that practice in. But out of, when you're sitting with a classroom of students and you ask them to read aloud, some of them, possibly many of them, will just want to die on the spot. It's just not, it's not a nice thing to do when you don't have the confidence. So it's a lovely little confidence booster. And it also means that you can do that in your own, you can check it, you can listen to it, you can score it in your own time at home as well. So it takes a little bit of pressure sometimes out of that class time as well. So that's Fluency Tutor. Again, as I said before, I'm so happy to do a demo on that with anyone who wants it. So please just let me know afterwards if there's something you would like to see a little bit more of that. Are there any questions on that one?
Not at the moment. I just wanted to check when you had the names that came up on the screen, are they like real people, or are they sort of made up names? Is it simply because if they are real people, I'll have to blank them out before publishing it? I just wanted to check.
No, this is just my own little dashboard with my own little fake class. So no, it's absolutely fine.
That's fine. Cool. Let's see if there's oh right, so Melody is saying I could see how you could use the English text with newcomer children. Yeah, good point, Melody, thank you. That's great. I mean, would it be possible to do a little demo of Fluency Tutor just so that we can sort of get a better idea on exactly how it works? Would that be possible?
I would love to. The issue with Fluency Tutor is I can't be logged on as both a teacher and a student at the same time.
Right.
So I can't really do a live demo. But again, I can provide that afterwards. So this is what it looks like for a student. This is what it would look like for the student. They would hit the record button. And then this is what it looks like for the teacher. So that's to sort of give you the idea. Right. But in terms of a live demo, I have to do all kinds of logging out and logging back in, and it'll probably take up quite a bit of time. And as I said to you, and I could show this in greater detail to anyone who wants to know at a later stage, that you'll get a graph, you'll be able to see the progression if they're improving, which you hope they are with all of this practice, this good practice that they're getting in, and you'll be able to see how they're doing and look at that, look at it at student level. Again, this is all through Google Classroom, so it integrates really nicely with that. Okay.
Awesome, thank you. Great.
Okay, well then I'll move on to the final one. So we're doing okay for time, so that's great. I'll move on to Orbit. So this is the one, if you remember at the very start I mentioned, this is solving your PDF concerns, solving some of the challenges that come with working with PDFs and bringing some of that sort of power of read and write, some of those accessibility tools into your PDFs, which will hopefully make your sort of assignment look that little bit easier. So this is what a PDF looks like when it's opened with Orbit Doc. So again, we've got a toolbar, and you'll see things in there hopefully that you'll recognize from read and write. You've got your dictionaries, your picture dictionaries, your screen mask, your vocabulary list. So all of those tools are in here as well, along with a number of extra ones. And again, this is available in a few languages. I'll just show you how that works. If I click on the three dots again, I'm going to settings. So you'll see I have it set in English at the moment, but again, those other languages are available, and that's the languages that it's fully localized into. But don't forget, similar to read and write, a lot of the tools will still work in other languages. It's just that these are the ones that the dictionaries are available in and the sort of full localization. So if I change this to French now, you'll see that everything has changed to French. Your students may or may not like that. You may or may not like that. sometimes when it's menus that you're not quite familiar with, it's actually easier to leave them in English or your own language. In terms of speech, again, it's just about picking the correct voice for the language that you need. And again, look at all of these languages are available. So don't worry too much about that shorter list, because you've got all of your other languages in here. There's your Polish for the person who asked for that. You know, you've got Portuguese, your French, your Spanish, Colombian Spanish, should your students or you like to mix it up a little bit. German is there somewhere. There's German, there's Italian. Okay, so remember that all of those languages are there for you. Okay, and again, a translation tool, same thing. It's a one-word translation. So in this case, I will go to French and to translate it to English. We'll just click on that. So this is a PDF. It's a very simple PDF, a very simple little document. But just to sort of give you an idea of how what some of the tools are. So, you know, in the past, we've got a PDF and you give it out. The student isn't always going to be able to respond or to complete the exercise on that PDF. So there are a few ways here for your students to complete these exercises. The first one is freehand drawing. So if I'm not using a touchscreen device, but if your student, I'm using a mouse, so that's why it's going to be a little bit, there we go. If your student's using a touchscreen device, they will probably love this. It will work really, really nicely for them. It's not quite so easy with a mouse, but the option is there. And again, for all sorts of different exercises, maybe where they have to draw a line, you know, between two options, or they actually just want to use a drawing to kind of express themselves or to express their answer, express their workings out, whatever it might be, that freehand option is there. And we've also got a text box option. So let's see if I can get it. There we go. Telling me my internet connection is unstable, but I'm assuming you can still hear me. Sorry about that. There we go. I'll try typing up here to give you an idea. So you've got a text box that could be used to complete the exercises down here, or for whatever you need that to be for. Just while I'm on this, because it is, again, we're sort of back to the whole, how do we involve students as much as possible? How do we work in a way that works for them? How do we allow them to express themselves in the way that suits them best? So it's bringing that whole differentiation and that whole sort of inclusive classroom thing back into PDFs as well, just to make sure that students have multiple ways of expressing themselves and of completing the work. Probably not specifically in this task, which is fairly simple, but you know that there are options there. For example, there's your predictive text again. There's your text voice input, speech input again. If I use the comments, let's see, we'll click this off. If I use the comment function here, we've got, again, predictive text, again, your speech input. You can attach a photo, you can attach some other kind of document. A teacher might want to do that to link documents together, to pull other things in, but also your student might want to use that to explain something, or in preparing a project, whatever it might be, and that there are all sorts of options there for them to complete this piece of work. Then it goes to you, again, through Google Classroom, goes to you. You can mark it, again, using any of these features, the text boxes, the comment section. There's a lovely little push pin tool here where you would put a pin in, type your comment, and then when the student sees the pin, they can click on it and see what you have to say. There's also the voice note again, that little icon there. We talked a little bit earlier about voice notes. That's a really nice way for you to provide some feedback, or for indeed the student to use again as their preferred way to express themselves, or to ask a question, or whatever it might be. So all of those different tools are built in to your PDFs. So you can take all those lovely resources you have, or you can take the new resources that you find on the internet or that someone shares with you, and they're good to go. They're good to go with Orbit Doc.
We just had a great question from Lauren, Alison, if that's okay, which is, may I just ask, do all of these work on phones with the documents? Sometimes pupils don't have access to other devices at home. I know you sort of talked about how the different tools work on all devices, but could you maybe clarify, for example, what you've just seen? Would that work, for example, on a mobile phone or on a tablet?
It won't work on a phone. At the minute, So the orbit, this particular orbit that I'm showing is just for Google, okay? So it's just going to be on a Chromebook, a Google device. Again, there's so much variety here of between the different products and between the different platforms and so on, but it won't work on a phone at the moment, no. This will only work on a Google device, a Google Chromebook.
But things like read, write, etc., that will work on all devices. It's just the Orbit one in particular is only.
It won't work on a phone. Read and write still won't work on a phone, but it will work on a tablet, for example.
Right.
So, yeah. So again, I'm really happy to answer those sort of questions individually because it is there is a lot. I've included a lot into tonight, and I don't want to confuse you too much. So I'm really happy to answer those questions individually afterwards. But no, read and write, none of them will work on a phone, I'm afraid, at the moment. That's where we're with that.
No problem. That's great.
iPad, a different device at home, a different Mac at home, where you're using Google Windows in the school and you've got a Mac at home, absolutely, it'll work on that. Okay. The joys of technology.
Yeah, absolutely.
All sorts of variables and all sorts of different ways that things work. So it is a little confusing. So yes, I'm really happy to sort out individually on those things. I thought I would go over the hour, but I've kept very nicely within it. So I'm just going to, if there are any more questions, we can absolutely address them. What I do have for you is I've got a bit of an overview of some of what I've talked about here today in a PDF form that I'm really happy to send you. So if you think that's something that you would like, just use that email address, education@texthelp.com, and just put MFL in your subject line, and I'll send that straight back to you tomorrow. Okay, and it's just a bit of an overview for you to then look through. Similarly, if you have any other questions, any of the things we've talked about here, any of those kind of what device will it work on, etc., or anything that comes to your mind, even just as you think this over the next few days, send it to that education@texthelp.com address or to my own email if you've got it at the start. I'll be really happy to answer any of your questions and that way. But if there's any other questions now,
we haven't got any other questions, but we've heard Elizabeth was saying great info, and also yes, good to know what type of devices will the platform Orbit .doc work on, and thank you in capital letters, which is lovely to see. So I think everyone's found it really, really useful, Alison. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, the PDF stuff is very interesting. So there is a PDF option in the Windows version of Read and Write, sort of built in, but it doesn't have quite all of the same functionality. So again, I'm really, really happy to chat through with anyone that wants to talk about that individually. That's no problem.
Awesome. So I think we'll stop the recording now, if that's okay, and then I'll allow people to turn their mics on and what have you if they want to ask any other questions. But if it's, are you happy for me to stop the recording now, Alison? Is that all right?
Yes, very happy.
Okay, great. So I'll hit stop now.